Dolan did not trade in his Cadillac every year, or even every two. The gray sedan DeVille he was driving as that June neared its end was 3 years old. I knew its dimensions exactly. I had written the GM company for them, pretending to be a research writer. They had sent me an operator's manual and a spec sheet for that year's model. They even returned the stamped self-addressed envelope I'd enclosed. Big companies apparently maintain their courtesy even when they're running in the red. I'd taken 3 figures, the Cadillac's width at its widest point, height at its tallest, and length at its longest, to a friend of mine who teaches mathematics at Las Vegas High School. I have told you, I think, that I had prepared for this, and not all my preparation was physical. Most assuredly not. I presented my problem as a purely hypothetical one. I was trying to write a science fiction story, I said, and I wanted to have my figures exactly right. I even made up a few plausible plot fragments. My own inventiveness rather astonished me. My friend wanted to know how fast this alien scout vehicle of mine would be going. It was a question I had not expected, and I had asked him if it mattered. "Of course it matters," he says. "It matters a lot. If you want the scout vehicle in your story to fall directly into your trap, the trap has to be exactly the right size. Now, this figure you've given me is 17 feet by 5 feet. I opened my mouth to say that wasn't exactly right, but he was already holding up his hand. "Just an approximation," he said. "Makes it easier to figure out the arc." "The what?" "The arc of descent," he repeated, and I cooled off. That was a phrase with which a man bent on revenge could fall in love. It had a dark, smoothly portentous sound. The arc of descent. I'd taken it for granted that if I dug a grave so that the Cadillac could fit, it would fit. It took this friend of mine to make me see that before it could serve its purpose as a grave, it had to work as a trap. The shape itself was important, he said. The sort of slit trench that I had been envisioning might not work. In fact, the odds of its not working were greater than the odds that it would. "If the vehicle doesn't hit the start of the trench dead on," he said, "it might not go all the way in at all. It would just slide along on an angle for a while, and when it stopped, all the aliens would climb out of the passenger door and zap your heroes." The answer, he said, was to widen the entrance end, giving the whole excavation a funnel shape. Then there was this problem of speed. If Dolan's Cadillac was going too fast and the hole was too short, it would fly across, sinking a bit as it went, and either the frame or the tires would strike the lip of the hole on the far side. It would flip over on its roof, but without falling in the hole at all. On the other hand, if the Cadillac was going too slowly and the hole was too long, it might land at the bottom on its nose instead of its wheels, and that would never do. You couldn't bury a Cadillac with the last 2 feet of its trunk and its rear bumper sticking out of the ground any more than you could bury a man with his legs sticking up. "So, how fast will your scout vehicle be going?" I calculated quickly. On the open highway, Dolan's driver kept it pegged between 60 and 65. He would probably be driving a little slower where I had planned to make my try. I could take away the detour signs, but I couldn't hide all the road machinery or erase all signs of construction. "About 20 rule," I said. He smiled. "Translation, please?" "Say 55 Earth miles an hour." "Aha!" He set to work at once with his slipstick while I sat beside him, bright-eyed and smiling, thinking about that wonderful phrase, arc of descent. He looked up almost at once. "You know," he said, "you might want to think about changing the dimensions of the vehicle, buddy." "Oh? Why do you say that?" "Well, 17 by 5 is pretty big for a scout vehicle," he laughed. "It's damn near the size of a Lincoln Mark IV. I laughed too. We laughed together. After I saw the women going into the house with the sheets and towels, I flew back to Las Vegas. I unlocked my house, went into the living room, picked up the telephone. My hands trembled a little. For 7 years I had waited and watched like a spider in the eaves or a mouse behind the baseboard. I had tried never to give Dolan the slightest clue that Elizabeth's husband was still interested in him. The totally empty look he had given me that day as I had passed his disabled Cadillac on the way back to Vegas, furious as it had made me at the time, was my just reward. But now, I would have to take a risk. I would have to take it because I could not be in two places at the same time, and it was imperative that I know if Dolan was coming, and when to make the detour temporarily disappear. I'd worked out a plan coming home on the plane. I thought it would work. I would make it work. I dialed Los Angeles Directory Assistance and asked for the number of Big Joe's cleaning service. I got it and dialed it. "This is Bill at Rennie's Catering," I said. "We got a party Saturday night at 1121 Astor Drive in the Hollywood Hills. I wanted to know if one of your girls could check for Mr. Dolan's big punch bowl in the cabinet over the stove. Could you do that for me?" I was asked to hold on. I did, somehow, although with the passing of each endless second, I became more and more sure that he had smelled a rat and was calling the phone company on one line while I held on the other. At last, at long last, he came back on. He sounded upset, but that was all right. That was just how I wanted him to sound. "Saturday night?" "Yes, that's right. But I don't have the punch bowl as big as they're going to want unless I call across town, and my impression was that he already has one. I'd just like to be sure." "Look, mister, my call sheet says Mr. Dolan ain't expected until 3 p.m. Sunday afternoon. I'll be glad to have one of my girls check out your punch bowl, but I want to straighten this other business out first. Mr. Dolan is not a man to fuck around with, if you'll pardon my French." "I couldn't agree with you more," I said. "And if he's going to show up a day early, I've got to send some more girls out there right away." "Let me double-check," I said. The third-grade reading textbook I used, Roads to Everywhere, was on the table beside me. I picked it up and riffled some pages close to the phone. "Oh boy," I said, "it's my mistake. He's having people on Sunday night. Really sorry. You gonna hit me?" "Nah. Listen, let me put you on hold again. I'll get one of the girls and have a check on the—" "No need, if it's Sunday," I said. "My big punch bowl's coming back from a wedding reception in Glendale Sunday morning." "Okay, take it easy." Comfortable, unsuspicious. The voice of a man who wasn't going to think twice. I hoped. I hung up and sat still, working it out in my head as carefully as I could. To get to L.A. by 3, he would be leaving Vegas about 10 o'clock Sunday morning, and he would arrive in the vicinity of the detour between 11:15 and 11:30 when traffic was apt to be almost non-existent anyway. I decided it was time to stop dreaming and start acting. I looked through the want ads, made some telephone calls, and went out to look at 5 used vehicles that were within my financial reach. I settled on a battered Ford van that had rolled off the assembly line the same year Elizabeth was killed. I paid cash. I was left with only $257 in my savings account, but this did not disturb me in the slightest. On my way home, I stopped at a rental place the size of a discount department store and rented a portable air compressor, using my MasterCard as collateral. Late Friday afternoon, I loaded the van, picks, shovels, compressor, a hand dolly, a toolbox, binoculars, and a borrowed highway department jackhammer with assorted arrow-shaped attachments made for slicing through asphalt. A large, square piece of sand-colored canvas, plus a long roll of canvas. This latter had been a special project of mine last summer, and 21 thin wooden struts, each 5 feet long. Last but not least, a big industrial stapler. On the edge of the desert, I stopped at a shopping center and stole a pair of license plates that I put on my van. 76 miles west of Vegas, I saw the first orange sign. Construction ahead. Pass at your own risk. Then a mile or so beyond that, I saw the sign that I'd been waiting for since Elizabeth died, I suppose, although I hadn't always known about it. Detour ahead, 6 miles. Dusk was deepening towards dark as I arrived and surveyed the situation. It could have been better if I'd planned it, but not much. The detour was a right turn between 2 rises. It looked like an old fence line road, which the highway department had smoothed and widened to temporarily accommodate the heavier traffic flow. It was marked by a flashing arrow powered by a buzzing battery in a padlocked steel box. Just beyond the detour, as the highway rose towards the crest of that second rise, the road was blocked off by a double line of road cones. Beyond them, if one was so extraordinarily stupid as to have first missed the flashing arrow and second run over the road cones without realizing it, and I suppose some drivers were, was an orange sign almost as big as a billboard reading, "Road closed, use detour." Yet the reason for the detour was not visible from here, and that was good. I didn't want Dolan to have the slightest chance of smelling the trap before he fell into it. Moving quickly, I didn't want to be seen at this. I got out of the van and quickly stacked up some dozen of the road cones, creating a lane wide enough for the van. I dragged the "road closed" sign to the right, then ran back to the van, got in, and drove through the gap. Now I could hear an approaching motor. I grabbed the cones again, replacing them as fast as I could. 2 of them spilled out of my hands and rolled down the gully. I chased after them, panting. I tripped over a rock in the dark and fell sprawling, and got up quickly with the dust on my face and blood dripping from one palm. The car was closer now, and soon it would appear over the last rise before the detour junction, and in the glow thrown by his high beams, the driver would see a man in his jeans and t-shirt trying to replace road cones, while his van stood idling where no vehicle that didn't belong to the Nevada State Highway Department was supposed to be. I got the last cone in place and ran back to the sign. I tugged too hard. It swayed and almost fell over. As the approaching car's headlights began to brighten on the rise to the east, I suddenly became convinced it was Nevada State Trooper. The sign was back where it had been, and if it wasn't, it was close enough. I sprinted for the van, got in, and drove over the next rise. Just as I cleared it, I saw the headlights splash over the rise behind me. Had he seen me in the dark, with my own lights out? I didn't think so. I sat back against the seat, eyes closed, waiting for my heart to slow down. At last, the sound of the car bouncing and bucketing its way down the detour faded out. It did. I was here, safe behind the detour. It was time to get to work. Beyond the rise, the road descended to a long, straight flat. 2/3 of the way along this straight stretch, the road simply ceased to exist. It was replaced by piles of dirt and a long, wide stretch of crushed gravel. Would they see that and stop? Turn around? Or would they keep on going, confident that there must be an approved way through since they hadn't seen any detour signs? Too late to worry about it now. I picked a spot about 20 yards into the flat, but still a 1/4 of a mile short of the place where the road dissolved. I pulled over to the side of the road, worked my way into the back of the van, and opened the back doors. I slid out a couple of boards and muscled the equipment. Then I rested and looked up at the cold desert stars. "Here we go, Elizabeth," I whispered to them. It seemed I felt a cold hand stroke the back of my neck. The compressor made a racket. The jackhammer was even worse, but there was no help for it. The best I could hope for was to be done with this first stage of work before midnight. If it went on much longer than that, I was going to be in trouble anyway, because I only had a limited quantity of gasoline for the compressor. Never mind. Don't think of who might be listening and wondering what fool might be running a jackhammer in the middle of the night. Think about Dolan. Think about the gray sedan DeVille. Think about the Ark of Descent.
This ends Disc 3.